Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in the southeast corner of Scotland. I hope everybody is doing well. I've had a better start to 2026, but I think most people know that by now. Yeah, so I hope everybody has had a great first half of their week. I am off on PTO right now, so I am not working, which has been a nice break, actually, a nice relief to not be working for a few days. So I've been just trying to, for the most part, just trying to just rest, basically. That's my phone farting at me, and just do not very much, really. I should probably put my phone on silent so that it doesn't make that sound. There we go. So it shouldn't make that sound anymore. So yeah, I hope everybody is doing well and has had a great first half of their week, as I just said. So tonight, of course, we are talking songwriting, composing, arranging, and music theory and those kind of things and related subjects. So if you have questions to do with any of those particular subject areas, please do get those in the chat just now, and I would be happy to answer your questions, whatever those questions are. You guys like to challenge me, so I am definitely up for a challenge. So yeah, hit me with your best questions, of course. And as always, if I don't know the answer, I'm just going to say I don't know. Because yes, I may well have a degree and a postgraduate degree in musicology. Doesn't mean I know everything about musicology, and it doesn't mean I know everything about music theory or any of that stuff. I can only speak from my experience and what I've learned over a 30 plus year career. So that's pretty much what I base everything off, which means there will be people who will disagree with me, because whilst music theory is largely just a collection of conventions, there's no real hard and fast rules. There's just accepted and agreed conventions as to what a certain thing might be, or a certain way of communicating a certain musical concept. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to know everything, because I don't. But I would be very, very happy to take all of your questions. So one of the things I thought that we should talk about is, seeing as we spent the last couple of weeks basically going over the chord assistant and the library that there is now of preset chords that you can just grab, and you can just basically, you don't even need to drag and drop. You can just select just with a click, and those chords from that preset will appear in the chord track. So we've kind of covered that. Now, if any of you who are watching have missed that, and you don't know what I'm talking about, I will cover it again if you would really like me to. So please just say so. If you want me to go over that again, I can certainly go over that again. Happy to do that. But also, I think we should talk about melody as well as chords and things like that, and how melody and chords interact, and how you can make melody from chords. Especially for you folks that are actually really good at chord changes and really good at coming up with interesting chord changes, but you just don't quite know how to get a melody working. We can discuss that as well. So if you are one of those people who is really good at coming up with chord changes, but not so good at coming up with a melody, please let me know in the chat, and we can go over some ideas as to how you can actually get a melody from the chords with pretty much no work. So let's see who is first in the door. That's one thing I should go over. Billy Morgan actually has restored his position as first in the door. Well done to you. Tony Stringer is here. Daryl Harrison is here. Peter Bata over in Montreal, Canada. Montreal's a beautiful city. I I have relatives over there. And Steve from the SRW Experience is here. Brett is popping in to say hello whilst he's at rehearsal. And we got Keith here as well. Another of our resident Canadians. And we got Dwayne here. We got Kyle here. We got Dave here. We got the repairman. We got Don Oliver here. And who else do we have? And we got Just Bob here, who's in the background because he's driving home. Going to be hit or miss the next couple of weeks. Okay, that's cool. That's not a problem. All right, so we got 3 questions, and I'm going to take these in order because actually they are all kind of related to each other. Looks like we're kind of sticking with the whole kind of chords thing for a minute here. So Kyle says, how do the different bass notes affect the meaning of a chord? Root, third, 5, 7, etc. They don't necessarily affect the meaning of a chord, but they can certainly affect the sound and the quality of a chord. They can provide some extra color. They can provide some extra tension, especially if you use the same bass note with maybe 2 or 3 different chords changing over the top. We call that a pedal point. So I can show you that. So let's take a simple C major chord. And then what we're going to do with the C major chord is we're going to put a different bass note underneath this C major chord and see kind of what it does to the chord. So let's start with the root, obviously. So this defines clearly that we have a C major triad. We have an E, which is the third. We have a G, and we got the root. And then we got the bass note doubling that root there. So if I then put the third of the chord, now what does this do to the sound of our chord? Well, it makes it a little bit less stable, but actually in a good way, because this third is leading, it's providing some tension and is leading us up to here, to chord 4. All right, so if we're in C major, chord 1 is going to be C. So chord 1 over the third is chord 1 over 3. So that's C with E in the bass. Leads us to chord 4. Now we can do this again to get to chord 5 to get back to 1. And the way we do this is we can go up chromatically with the bass note. And this will be going up from the F to the F sharp. And then this time we do a D triad. And then this will lead us to the G chord. So what you end up with is this nice little progression here. So we got C, F, D over F sharp, okay, and that brings us back to chord 1. And so what we have done here is we've got ourselves a nice simple chord progression for basically free without any real work. And we're rising chromatically. And that brings us back home to chord 1 with the C in the bass. So let's now change this. So we're going to put the 5 of the chord, which is the G, in the bass. Now, what is this doing? This is providing tension. So I'm changing between the C, the G. So I'm going chord 1, chord 5, chord 1. And I'm doing that over the top, but I'm keeping this G going. And it's not stable. It's providing tension because this G is begging to go here. And because the of that we call the fifth of the scale, we call it the dominant, because it is like a magnet, like gravity. It is pulling you to the center of mass, which is the root of the key center, which in this case is C for C major, right? So now you might be able to actually put those two chord progressions that we've started with here together. So let's do that. So we go. Okay, so that's what happens if you put the 5 in the bass. It provides some extra tension, can be used as a pedal point. So when I say a pedal point, what I mean is we can use the dominant in the pedal and we can change the chords over the top. All of that is basically just building up tension, leading back to 1. And I even really ratcheted up the tension there by having an A flat triad over the G, which resolves really nicely, actually. Okay, so tension, resolution is the name of the game for making music work. It is always this balance between consonance and dissonance, and that's what makes music have motion, have flow to it, in much the same way that a sentence does. Okay, so we've done the 3rd, the 5th, and the other one that Carl talked about is the 7th. Now, this is really, really interesting and very, very powerful, and actually it's one of my favorite sounds in all of music harmony. So this time we're going to put the 7th, and we're going to do the 2 different 7ths here. We're going to use the major 7 and the flat 7. Okay, so we're going to do the major 7 first, which is the one that probably sounds the ugliest until you resolve it. So Pachelbel's Canon, if you've never heard that before. Where basically it's walking down the scale, but you have this little chord here, C over B. This is the major 7. So that's going to be resolved by moving the bass note down onto A. And then we have the C with the 5th in the bass, and then C with the 3rd in the bass, and then chord 2 to chord 5. Okay, so we've done the major 7, so that's with the B. Let's try with the B flat. And that's where that tends to resolve. So you would resolve this C with the flat 7 in the bass, resolve this downwards to chord 4 with the 3rd in the bass. And then if you want to extend this idea, go down one more step, turn the 4 chord into a minor chord, and then So this could be quite interesting. And here's another version of that. I'm doing chord 5 with its 7th in the bass, which is G over F. And now that takes me to the C over the E. And then C minor over E flat. And then we could do so let's put all of that together. And then maybe okay, so I could put all of these ideas together in one little set of chord changes. Okay, so bass notes are really, really important for basically extending the harmony of your song without doing any real hard work. You're just inverting the chords, and by doing so, you provide extra tonality. Well, not tonality, but extra tonal color and extra tension that will give your chord changes a sense of A, sophistication, and B, some momentum, and will allow you to explore things like passing chords and passing tones and things like that. Great question, Kyle. So let's move on to Dave's question. Well, it's not really a question, but it might be. He says, I learned a new term last week, voice leading in chords. Perhaps you may wish to elaborate. Voice leading. This is where the different voices in the chord, if you imagine that I've got 3 singers here. So voice leading is where each note moves smoothly by step or by a simple interval. All right? So if I was to move this second inversion C major chord and move this top note up, and then move this bottom note up, now I have a first inversion F major chord. So that's what we call voice leading, where each of the voices in the chords move nice and smoothly, rather than doing this. And all of those are root chords, root position chords. Now there's nothing wrong about that. It's just that it doesn't sound natural. You know, a big leap. Now, there may be instances where you might want a large leap, and that would be fine, but you then need to contrast that large leap with some smoother voice leading to kind of offset the fact that you've done a large leap. So there is an example of this in the backing vocals at the end of Hey 19 by Steely Dan. Where the backing vocals do this. And then they do an octave leap. And then you get the smooth voice leading. And you get that resolution there on the A7, with the 7 at the bottom resolving down to the 3rd of the D major triad, right? So let's do that again. So it goes from a D to a G to an A7. Then D, D first inversion, then D root position, then leap an octave, and then second inversion D to G, which sounds nice and natural. Okay? So there's an example where you have a contrast between smooth voice leading by stepwise motion and then an octave leap. And then to justify the octave leap, you then go into smooth voice leading to that resolution on that first inversion D major chord. Okay? So that's what voice leading is. It's where the notes in each voice move by step or by a simple interval, like a major third or a minor third. But occasionally you might get an interval of a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth, but those are kind of awkward for most people to be able to sing. So you want to have good voice leading to basically prevent that kind of a leap from happening. That's a good question again. And then Dwayne says, does harmony necessarily make chords? Yes, harmony does make chords, but not necessarily what you would call a traditional, easy to describe chord. So harmony can be complex or it can be simple. So, for example, the Hey 19 backing vocals, right? That's all simple triadic voice leading and simple motion, okay? Simple harmony, it's all nice and triadic. But it does, when you hear the three vocalists sing it together, it does kind of sound sophisticated. The reason why it sounds sophisticated is because you've got this happening in the bass. Okay, so you got that kind of a bass line going on at the same time, and so when you put those two things together, it does sound quite sophisticated, even though the two elements are actually really simple. But harmony doesn't have to function in that way. So harmony can be very, very functional, just like that, or it can be very non-functional, where the harmony itself exists just for its own sake, just for its own sonorous characteristics. So just simply because this chord sounds, and I like the way that chord on its own sounds, and then the next chord has its own sound again, and is not necessarily related to the first chord. So you get this in more late 20th, middle 20th century into the latter half of the 20th century classical music. People like Berlioz and Schoenberg and Webern and Berg, kind of from that Austrian and French school. They were basically working with sophisticated harmonic ideas and concepts, but they were also reaching back to the Impressionist school, people like Ravel and Debussy. In particular, if you listen to people like Debussy, you'll hear chords that don't make sense, but they sound great on their own. but they don't make sense in a logical progression, because Debussy would do things like parallel ninth chords. So he would take a ninth chord like this one here, this C9 chord. Or he might, I mean, that's quite close voicing, so maybe he might open it up a bit like this. Let's see. Right? And then these parallel chords, they don't have a particular progression to them, unlike right? That has a logical progression to it that makes sense. It's a completely different genre, completely different style, but the harmonic ideas are very, very different. So Debussy and Ravel's music, you know, that kind of harmonic idea that's not functional at all, and borrowing chords that don't belong to a particular key. So harmony can be as complicated or as simple as you want. It depends upon the genre, depends upon the style of music that you're working in, but also you can make simple harmonies sound complex. Just depends upon how you voice the chords and how you make them, how you make the harmonies work. For example, if I was to take this G major triad, second inversion, and if I put a C bass underneath it, now you get something that sounds neither major nor minor, but sounds sophisticated, when it's really just a triad with a bass note that is a fourth away from the root. So we get a G over C, and I'm just moving that down a tone. You know, and you can just move these around. And, you know, before you know it, you're into another Steely Dan song. Which is where they're taking that kind of major triad with a bass note a fourth away and just shifting those around to provide something that just sounds very, 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 very sophisticated, but it's simple harmony, right? So does harmony necessarily make chords? In both of those examples, the Ravel, the Debussy kind of parallel ninth kind of things, parallel 13th chords, and then the more kind of Steely Dan kind of sound, yeah, those do make chords, but you can have harmony that doesn't necessarily make chords, though. So you can do this. Those are all harmonies, but they don't necessarily make chords in the conventional sense. But they're still harmonies. Equally, you can do this. I'm a little bit stuck, hang on. And again, all of those are harmonies, but they're not the same thing as the other examples. Okay, so some of that was based around the diminished whole tone scale, some of that was based around just the whole tone scale. Again, kind of very Debussyan, very Revelian, particularly the whole tone scale. Debussy was a big fan of the whole tone scale. So if you want to listen to kind of a contemporary composer, or kind of late contemporary composer by the name of Holst, Gustav Holst, German name, but pretty much, although born in Germany, grew up, educated in England, and he wrote a suite called the Planets Suite. I mean, that wasn't just the only work that he did. He wrote an awful lot of works, but the Planets Suite is probably the largest work that he wrote and the most well-known work that he wrote. But he also borrows from people like Ravel and Debussy, particularly if you listen to Neptune, the last movement, where the harmony is non-functional in its entirety for that movement. It's entirely non-functional harmony. And the idea is to create tone colors, shifting tone colors. And the way he does that is with the orchestration, how he voices these chords across the orchestra. So you have things like 2 or 3 harps playing different arpeggios with different pedal settings. You have 2 celestas. You have some more exotic instruments like bass clarinets and bassoons feature a lot more, and then trombones that have bucket mutes in front of them, in front of the bell, which softens the sound, and just like lots of soft shifting sounds where the chords are moving in a non-functional way, and the shifting different tone colors are to do with different sections of the orchestra playing different parts of the chords, and then moving to another chord, you get different tones coming through again. So it's well worth listening to that. And then, of course, you get the choir at the end, which is beautiful beyond description, because it's the only part of the entire work where there is a choir. The entire 9-movement work, the choir does not feature until the last 90 seconds of the work. So you're kind of taken completely by surprise by this extra added ear candy. And it's just heavenly. It's beautiful. It's glorious. And then it has like this interesting chord 5 to chord 1 that just loops. But it's not like, because that'd be very boring. It's layered with some additional extended notes in the chord to add dissonance and tension. So even the chord 1 is loaded with tension, because you have like the 3rd of the chord, and you have the 4th of the chord on the top, for example. So like that. So to make the chord 1 still not 100% resolved. And then what they do is the choir basically very, very quietly walks away. For a start, when you hear this work performed, the choir are actually behind the audience. Right? They're behind the audience, and then they basically walk away very, very quietly. Or the actual instruction on whole score is that the choir should be in an adjacent room with the door open, so that their sound is coming from the room through the door, and then when you get to that looping cadence at the end, the door is very, very slowly and quietly closed to give the impression of the choir fading away. Very, very clever, and it works beautifully. And Keith says, now I'm singing Let It Be. Yeah. There's another example of really, really great use of different bass notes for chords. Glenn is here. He says, so good voice leading keeps common tones in place and the rest move to the next nearest possible chord tone, not too much jumping around. Ideally, yes. You want to basically have smooth movement between your chords. Mostly because smooth movement between the voices is easier to play if you're an instrumentalist, but it's also easier to sing if you are a choir. So voice leading is crucial for a choir, although really, really, really good choirs can actually do quite sophisticated kind of leaps. And so that kind of a convention is less necessary if the choir is very, very good. But for the most part, yes, you want to get smooth voice leading between one chord and the next one. So you got to think carefully about how you voice the chords. So you're not just picking your favorite voicing that your fingers just fall under naturally. I tend to pick second inversion triads because I just like the sound of them for the most part, but I have to think about where that's going to go. I can't just do, okay, there's my second inversion C major, and then I want to go to a second inversion F major. Well, I have that big leap thing going on that doesn't sound very satisfactory, even though I'm using a different voicing. Right? And there may be some instances where that's what you do want, but for the most part, you don't. You want to do this. Where the bottom note, G, comes up to the A, and the top note, E, goes up to the F. See that stepwise motion? And it makes it nice and easy to play, makes it nice and easy for singers to sing. And in this case, you know, your alto voice, soprano, alto, tenor, your alto voice is pretty much singing the same note. It's just singing the root of the C major chord and the fifth of the F major chord. Nice and easy for them. They just get to stay on that one note. They are what you call the linchpin. And by the way, that's where that term comes from. Okay? So that's kind of smooth choral movement there. Right? So if I wanted to get into like writing a hymn, for example, or playing in a hymn-like fashion, everything there is nice and smooth, even between, you know, simple chords and then the G13 at the end, you know. Okay? So whether you're dealing with simple triadic harmony for your songs, or whether you're dealing with more extended chromatic harmony, then voice leading is essential for creating something that sounds smooth. So that was kind of like a little hymnal kind of style. What about something that's a little bit more harmonically sophisticated? So slightly more sophisticated, more, jazz orientated harmony, but the same kind of conventions apply. Smooth leading between chords, even chords that are not related to the key. Everything there that I played was in C major. Okay. But, I went into A flat minor very, very briefly. But it's all about moving smoothly between one chord and the next. And so this is why inversions exist, really, is to create movement between chords very, very easily and very, very smoothly. Excuse me. I'm still a little congested. Glenn says, tuned in late, but so glad I caught this. Will the live stream be posted as a video to watch and listen to later? Yes. All of my live streams they eventually become a video after the fact, and I have 2 playlists for my live streams. I have this one. This video is called Songwriting Simplified. This is the name of the stream. And there's a playlist with the same name. So if you want to go and check out all my other Songwriting Simplified shows, there's about 4 years worth. If you really want to binge watch 4 years worth of shows, you can certainly do that. And you can certainly watch as this studio evolves at the same time as well. I also have another show which happens on a Sunday night. It's at the same time, 6 p.m. Central Time. And again, if that particular time doesn't work for you, then again, there's a Sunday Night Live playlist, and there are over 400 shows there that you can choose from. The Songwriting Simplified playlist, I think, has 137 shows. So the Songwriting Simplified one isn't as big as the Sunday Night Live one. That one has nearly 500 shows over the last sort of 8-9 years or so. That particular show is much more focused around Studio One and Studio Pro 8 as well. And dealing with recording, mixing, mastering, much more technical. This is much more to do with songwriting, composing, arranging, music theory, that kind of thing. But welcome, Glenn. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you've subscribed, and I'm glad you've checked out the show. And if you like what I do here, then hopefully you'll be able to go back and check out some of my other shows and enjoy those too. Let's see. Kyle says his food is here and will join a chat later if one happens. Thank you for being here, Kyle, as ever. Mixmaster says, in music, a linchpin or linchpin refers to the essential foundational element, a person, instrument, or specific musical part that holds a song, performance, or band together. It signifies the critical, indispensable component without which the musical structure would collapse. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much that is true. So in the context of harmony, the linchpin is like a common tone. So common tones are really, really useful because common tones will help you provide substitute chords as well. So, for example, if we talk about tritonal substitutions, these are substitute chords that are a tritone away from the original chord. So, for example, if I was to take a C7 chord, and I wanted to go to the chord of F major, that works just perfectly fine because C7 is chord 5 in F major, so that works. But let's take out some of these notes and we will find that we've got 2 common tones in common with another chord that has the exact same notes in it, but it does a different thing altogether. So let's take out the G and we'll take out the C. So we're left with E and B flat, which is a nice flatted 5. So I've stripped it out to bare essentials. So these two are going to resolve. The E is going to resolve up, and the B flat is going to resolve down to an A, which is the third of the F major chord. Now, if I take this C away and play a G flat instead, we get the same thing. Let's transpose that bass note up an octave. Does exactly the same job because it's got two chord tones in common with the C7. So let's do the C7 to F, and then let's do the G flat 7 to F. Does the same kind of thing, right? Does pretty much the exact same job. So if I put a chord 2 in front of the 5 here, does the same job. And this is what tritonal substitution is. I'm using a G flat 7 instead of a C7, which is 3 whole tones, a tritone, away from the C, right? So the G flat replaces the C. And this works super smoothly. So if I was to go, let's say, not just 2-5-1, but 6-2-5-1 in the key of F. So 6 is D minor. We could substitute this D chord. Let's turn this D into a D7. Right? We could substitute this guy for an A flat 7 because we've got that tritone there. Right? So, whoops. Okay, does exactly the same job. And that's why tritone substitution works. You can do this repeatedly over a whole set of changes if you want. So yes, to answer the question fundamentally, harmony can be functional, can be non-functional. In the case of tritonal substitutions, it's functional just on a little bit more of a sophisticated level, but it's definitely functional. But harmony can be functional, it can be non-functional, it can be whatever you want it to be, and it doesn't have to be a chord. It can just be a... All of that's harmony. And in the correct context, that's what you want. That's the sound you need. You can't describe it. I can't describe that as like an A flat 7 flat 9 or anything like that, because it isn't. It's just my hand spamming the keys. So, you wouldn't notate that in the same way. It's non-functional. It's just a sound. But the sound can also be just as well. Doesn't have to be, a crunch of notes close together. It can be a crunch of notes that are spread out, so they are less crunchy together, but they are still very, very loaded with spice and tension. And just like good spice makes food very, very tasty, because you get the contrast between the spice and the non-spice, in the same way with harmony, if you have the right amount of spice, you'll make your music extra tasty to the ear. But if you have too much spice, too much dissonance, it won't be quite so tasty anymore. And that, of course, depends upon everybody's palate, everybody's harmonic palate. Just like everybody has a different food palate, some people don't like particularly spicy foods, they like quite plain foods. I'm one of these people that likes, a certain degree of spiciness, but not a whole lot. I'm not really a big spice person. I'm not the kind of guy that can go out and eat the hottest vindaloo that there is. I can't do that. Well, I can't go to an Indian restaurant and eat curry anyway, because I'll be sick for 3 days if I do, because I'm allergic to ghee. But besides the point, the point I'm making here is balance your spice and distribute your spice evenly across your entire arrangement, and the spice will add some extra flavor to your music to make it go and make it tastier. And that is what groups like Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers and other groups like that, even the Eagles, what they do exceedingly well is balance the amount of spice that there is harmonically. And they can make the simple sound sophisticated. They can make the sophisticated sound simple. And once you've got that down, that concept of making simple sophisticated and sophisticated sound simple, you are in that territory where you can write extremely good and extremely well balanced music, which is what you want to do. Matt is here, and he says, greetings to all. So hello to you too, my friend. You have arrived just as we are at the end of the show, basically. Keith says, today I learned what a pedal point is. Yes, pedal point is, in fact, there are two different pedal points. The most regular pedal point is the bass note where the chords change over the top. That's a pedal point. You can have an inverse pedal point where the pedal point is above the chords, right? So the chord changes are happening below and the pedal point stays, let's see. And you might find those kind of things at the start of, an overture for a Broadway show, for example, where you'll have the strings playing tremolo and the chord happening underneath it. The overture to what's the Billy Joel song? I'm trying to remember what it's called. I'm actually running the song through my head now to try and figure out what the heck that song is called. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, Billy Joel used this device quite a bit, where there's a pedal point and the chords are changing underneath it. And he basically hammers the note with two fingers, and then I don't know quite how he does it. He still voices the chords underneath. Dun, 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 like that. It's very, very clever, very, very technically fabulous, actually. Billy Joel has a fantastic piano technique. And it's a great song, but that uses an inverse pedal point as well. Mixmaster says, weren't those all bands whose albums were in reality largely the products of the Wrecking Crew and the producer, not the bands per se? Not in the case of Steely Dan. No, Steely Dan wasn't really the Wrecking Crew. I know exactly who you're talking about. Basically the session collective in LA in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, anchored mostly by Carol Kay, the bass player, and Hal Blaine, the drummer, and at various points Larry Carlton, the guitar player. Although some of the Wrecking Crew people did play on Steely Dan records, but for the most part, they weren't really involved. Chuck Rainey was not part of the Wrecking Crew particularly, but he was pretty much Steely Dan's regular bass player across most of their records in the 70s. And you had drummers like Jeff Porcaro and again Hal Blaine. I think he did play on one, maybe two Steely Dan tunes, but I have this feeling that the records that Hal Blaine did play on, I don't think his drum parts made the cut. It's one of the things that Steely Dan were famous for, was they would have a great musician come in and play, and then they would decide that actually they wanted to go with this other drummer instead. So, there would be great. Yeah, that's right. Hal Blaine played on Any World. Yeah, Any World That I'm Welcome To. Yeah. But he played on several other songs from that session, and he got replaced by either Jeff Porcaro or Steve Gadd. So Stereolab, you're absolutely right. Hal Blaine is the drummer on Any World, which is a great song, by the way. Really, really good song. But yeah, Steely Dan, it was mostly Gary Katz, the producer, with Walter and Donald, who basically decided who should play on, and I think it's Larry Carlton, or it might be Dean Parks, who basically said it like this. He said, Steely Dan, most other bands of that era would play, musical chairs with different musicians just to find the exact right combination of musicians for a particular record. But Steely Dan didn't just play musical chairs. They would play musical bands. So they would they would rehearse in the morning, and then they'd have lunch, and then they would cut the session. And then, so there would be guys who would be in the studio the whole day. So they would rehearse, they'd have lunch, they'd go and cut the tunes in the afternoon, and then they'd go off and to other record dates, I guess. And then the next day there might be a whole nother band doing the exact same songs. No, not The Entertainer. No. So yeah, Steely Dan were kind of a thing to their own, where they didn't just, hire a particular group of session musicians. They would like have two or three bands that would come and play the same set of tunes until they were happy with what they got. And so you would walk away from a session never knowing whether your work was going to make the cut. Rick Marotta was one of those LA session drummers, and he was just, he said, I never knew whether what I did was going to make the cut or not. Was it going to be on the record or not? And a decent number of his drum charts were on the record, but not everybody. Mixmaster said, while Steely Dan is known for utilizing elite session musicians, they largely worked with a later generation of players rather than the classic 60s Wrecking Crew. Yeah, Hal Blaine and Carol Kay and all of that from the 60s and early 70s, they mostly played on other records. They didn't really associate with Steely Dan particularly. Although I think Carol may have actually played on a Steely Dan session. But I'm led to believe that the work that she did, and she is one of the most recorded bass players in recording history, even she got replaced. I mean, Chuck Rainey is probably the other bass player, other than Carol and James Jamerson, who were probably the three most recorded bass players at that time. But yeah, I mean, by the time Steely Dan decided to start touring again in 1993, they had actually settled on a band for the first time since 1974. They finally settled on an actual band, and they toured 93 with one particular band, and then they toured in 94 with a completely another band. And then from, I think, probably 2003 until the present day, they've had largely the same personnel. So John Harrington, the guitar player, he has been with Steely Dan since 2003. Keith Carlock, the drummer, has been with them for the same amount of time. And that's rare. You know, Donald and Walter were famous for, you know, multiple drummers in their recordings or on their tours. But, you know, the fact that they've actually had records like Two Against Nature and Everything Must Go, where it's the same drummer on on every tune, is a miracle, really. Now you have me curious. Was it Billy Joel's remake of Biz Markie's Just a Friend? Nope, that's not the song either. It is actually one of Billy's songs. More than likely what will happen is I will finish the show now, I will go to bed, and I will wake up at like 3 a.m. with the name of the song. And if I do that, I will put it in the comments below. Yes, that's exactly how Carol Kay started as a session bass player. She is actually a phenomenal guitar player. She was a jazz guitar player. She has phenomenal bebop chops. Having grown up in that bebop era as a young lady, she got to play with some of the bebop first generation beboppers, which is where she learned her craft as a guitar player. And like you say, you know, they needed a bass player, and she stepped up and she played on that date as a bass player, and then she just, you know, everybody was just like, wow, she's a really gifted bass player. All right, so that's us done for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. You guys have been fantastic. Thanks for all of your patience over the last 2 or 3 months, where shows have been sporadic, to say the least, because my dad died in January, and I'm still kind of dealing with all of that. And I've also been sick as a dog as well. But thank you very much, everybody, for all of your patience. I'm still not 100% fit yet, but I'm trying very hard to get back into a routine of 2 weekly shows, and I am making my way through editing up all of my Studio Pro 8 videos, and they are going to be drip feeding out over the course of the next few weeks. So watch out for those. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit that notification bell and all of that fun stuff. Smash the life out of the like button, all of that stuff. I would appreciate it a lot. And I will see you all on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Good night, everybody.